Guess it just went live without waiting for me to push the button. Just give me a second, guys. I'm getting some weird. Okay, looks like we're good. What's going on? Are we live? I just have a black screen. Can somebody let me know in the comments if it's just a glitch on my end or... Okay, there we go. All right, we are here. Let me know in the comments if the audio is okay. I've been having a lot of problems with that lately. The great work. This is a term that is shrouded in mystery. It has different interpretations. And you kind of just have to choose one, you know? So I think of the great work in terms of microcosm and macrocosm. Every individual human being has a great work to perform, and this is the realization and application of your true will. On a global scale, or on a universal scale, a better word, you could think of the great work as the process of the distillation of light into matter and being and consciousness, and then the reintegration of that light when the matter is dissolved, when all of the antiparticles collide and leave behind nothing but photons, the light returns and the whole process starts again. So, in short, that's the universal scale great work, and then the great work of every individual is the transmutation of the lead of everyday experience into the gold of higher consciousness. Speaking of that, let me check in with the chat. Actually, I don't even know why I blew this up. Make sure my audio is okay. What's going on here? I thought I escaped full screen. There we go. Okay. So let's see. Audio's good? All right. Good to hear. Audio's good. Excellent. So in my case, my life's great work. I just got a bomb dropped on me the other day. And like I said, I'm not going to get into all the details, but especially if you're a deadhead, make sure you turn on your bell notifications so you get to follow this story. It really is an incredible story. It is both tragic and inspiring and pathetic and unbelievable. And I'm going to try to fix what happened, basically. And I'm going to start an internet campaign to do it. And just to give a quick summary, basically I left Virginia at 21 years old with the intent of going to play with certain musicians. And within 3 weeks of making my presence in their hometown, I had made contact with both of them, and my guitar teacher sent a recording of me playing at a jam session. The guy came down, this legend, after hearing the recording, and I didn't go. And I knew that he came to the jam session, but the fact that it was actually arranged by Verdon, I did not know. And so there's a lot to it, and I'm like I said, I'm going to make the video, and I'm going to withhold the rest of the details until then. But this is wild. It's a wild situation, and it's had me reeling, just on so many levels. There's just so much to unpack. That's why I don't want to even start talking about it. But keep an eye out for those videos, because I'm going to need all the support I can get to try to make this lifetime actually not sort of, I don't want to say wasted, that's not true, but you know what I mean. Line up a long shot, maybe try 2 times, maybe more. So the great work, the great work is, before all things, the creation of man by himself, that is to say, the full and entire conquest of his faculties and his future. I just cannot believe this, man. This happened a few days ago, and that's the first line of this. You know, it's just, and this has been a constant presence ever since this has come to light, and actually leading up to it. People were saying things in the chat, in the stream before, I think the night that I had this realization that foreshadowed the realization, you know. It's just really interesting, you know. Once you have engaged that dialogue with the universal mind, it is just a ubiquitous presence, you know. And one of the most difficult things that we have before us as initiates and really just as humans is to learn how to comply, how to see the instructions, how to read the signs, symbols, hints, clues, writing on the wall. Rest is up to you. Sorry, you guys. It just kind of choked me a little bit there. The great work is before all things the creation of man by himself. That is to say, the full and entire conquest of his faculties and his future. It is especially the perfect emancipation of his will, assuring him universal dominion over Azat and the domain of Magnesia. In other words, full power over the universal magical agent. This agent, disguised by the ancient philosophers under the name of the first matter, determines the forms of modifiable substance, and we can really arrive by means of it at metallic transmutation and the universal medicine. This is not a hypothesis, and once you hear my story in a couple of days, you will, you know, it really is proof that what he's saying is true. But there are certain guidelines that you have to operate within, or it can go off the rails, as you will also hear from my story. It is a scientific fact already established and rigorously demonstrable. Nicholas Flamel and Raymond Lilly, both of them poor, indubitably distributed immense riches. Agrippa never proceeded beyond the first part of the great work, and he died in the ordeal, fighting to possess himself and to fix his independence. While I'm thinking about it too, something that's really essential to this, and you have no choice in the matter. You know, it's not like you can decide that this is the case or not. But the law of necessity applies to everything. And one of the real secrets to actually realizing your dreams and accomplishing your personal great work is that your purpose, if your purpose is aligned with a greater necessity, your chances of success are almost assured, or at least being presented the opportunity for success. There is a certain need for the service I was trying to provide. And that is the primary reason that I was assisted and able to maneuver myself into so many impossible circumstances. Unfortunately, I had not dealt with my traumas and issues enough to accept this when it manifested. And that's another thing that, you know, we all have to be prepared for. If you have too much power before you have enough wisdom, it's just going to be a mess, you know. And you may be able to generate all sorts of improbable, to the edge of impossibility kind of circumstances, but you will not be able to make lasting investitures of them unless you have become a hollow tube to bring that fire down from heaven. Those dissonance patterns will react with the energy in your environment. Now, there are two hermetic operations, the one spiritual, the other material, and these are mutually dependent. For the rest, all hermetic science is contained in the doctrine of Hermes, which is said to have been originally inscribed upon an emerald tablet. Its first articles have been already expounded, and those follow which are concerned with the operation of the great work. Thou shalt separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently, with great industry. It rises from earth to heaven, and again it descends to earth, and it receives the power of things above and of things below. By this means shalt thou obtain the glory of the whole world, and all darkness shall depart from thee. It is the strong power of every power, for it will overcome all that is subtle and penetrate all that is solid. Thus was the world created. To separate the subtle from the gross in the first operation, which is wholly interior, is to set the soul free from all prejudice and all vice, which is accomplished by the use of the philosophical salt. That is to say, wisdom. Of mercury, that is personal skill and application. Finally, of sulfur, representing vital energy and fire of will. By these are enabled to change into spiritual gold things which are of all least precious, even the refuse of the earth. And so, this is a huge mistake that people make when they get involved with magic. The biggest mistake is to think that your power can do more for you than it can. That's the primary thing. And sort of ancillary to that is people try to acquire talents they do not have through magic. And that's not how it works. You must develop the skill set. You must arrange the circumstances. If you wish to publish a book, you must call forth, or you must get a magical weapon called a pen or a laptop. And you must use the magical weapon to write incantations, words in a language that the people that you need to communicate with can understand. Then you need to call forth printers, spirits known as printers and publishers. This is from Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice, by the way, loosely. But that's the thing, that your alignment with your true will and your alignment with the law of necessity. This is why the right-hand path is better than the left-hand path, too, by the way. I mean, it's one reason. It's not the only reason, but it's, a good reason. Totally lost my train of thought there. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can get it back. Yeah, if you have done those two things, and you expand your consciousness and you study the sciences and you understand what is below, which is subatomic particles, and what is above is the macro laws. And, you inculcate the ability to interpret the allegories of the book of nature and to interface with the laws in such a way that it will appear that you have transcended those laws. That's what magic is. It's not about a cheat code. It's not about getting things by muttering spells and not having to work for it. There's no shortcuts in this world. That's not at all what this is about. And the most complete set of talents and virtues is wholly useless in the absence of willpower and discipline. In this sense, we must interpret the parables of the choir of philosophers Bernard, Trevisan, Basil, Valentine, Mary the Egyptian, and other prophets of alchemy. But in their works, as in the great work, we must adroitly separate the subtle from the gross, the mystical from the positive, allegory from theory. If we would read them with profit and understanding, we must take them first of all as allegorical in their entirety, and then descend from allegories to realities by the way of the correspondence of analogies indicated in the one dogma. That which is above is proportional to that which is below, and reciprocally. Descending from allegories to realities, and the necessity to follow the sciences in your day and age, right, allows us to decode the allegories. For example, the light bearer, the word that rushed forth in the beginning, the oscillating wave that brought forth light. That's really what the Logos is. The vibration that compelled the chaotic elements of the primordial energetic stew to arms and order, to symmetry. And we realize that the light bearer is the oscillating wave. And we realize that the demonization, the church blackening the name of Lucifer, was really an effort to conceal these empowering truths and to demonize consciousness itself. The word art, when reversed or read after the manner of sacred and primitive characters from right to left, gives three initials, which express the different grades of the great work. T signifies triad, theory, and travail. R, realization, and A, adaptation. Damn. I almost can't even do this right now, you guys. It's a little bit too poignant. It keeps stinging me. In the 12th chapter of the ritual, we shall give the process for adaptation in use among the great masters, especially that which is contained in the hermetic citadel of Henry Coonrot. In this place, we may indicate for the researches of our readers an admirable treatise attributed to Hermes Trismegistus entitled Minerva Mundi. It is found only in certain editions of Hermes and contains, beneath allegories full of profundity and poetry, the doctrine of individual self-creation, or the creative law consequent on the accordance between two forces which are termed fixed and volatile by alchemists and are necessity and liberty in the absolute order. The diversity of the forms which bound in nature is explained in this treatise by the diversity of spirits, and monstrosities by the divergence of efforts. Its reading and assimilation are indispensable for all adepts who would fathom the mysteries of nature and devote themselves seriously to the search after the great work. There's something I gotta go look back and remind myself. Oh yeah, necessity and liberty. So the law of necessity dictates to us that everything happens must happen, that the laws of the universe are just not because they're his laws, but his laws because they are just. Meaning that the universe is as it is because it could not be predicated along any other order and happen, right? And then that brings up the question of free will. The reality is that the universe is constituted upon the interplay of antinomies. It's generated by that functionality. And so there are equal parts, chaos and order. So for example, we are governed largely by our subconscious, we're told. But there is chaos in all systems. And so that chaos allows for some wiggle room. Right? So that's really the key to this, is understanding the parameters that we're operating within, the fixed and the volatile. Also, something I missed earlier, there was a reference to how the things below are proportional to the things above. We do not want faith in this system. We're looking for certainty. And so on the level of the subatomic, if you were to shrink down to the same size that you are relative to the Earth right now, got to get this right. Friedrich Capra, you should read the book. It's really good, from the 70s, physicist that was also a mysticist. Friedrich Capra, The Tao of Physics, I think it's called. There would be the same distance between you and the moon, or you and the nearest proton as there is now between you and the moon, and about the same distance from you to the sun, to the nearest electron. As above, so below, and beyond, I imagine. Push the envelope, watch it bend. Thank you, Maynard James Keenan. Should I check in with the chat again and see how you guys are doing? I guess I probably should. Please consider sharing these streams, you guys. They have not been getting the love that they need, and I really do think that they have. This information has value, so I really hate to see it. You know, not even for me, but I just really think this needs to be common knowledge. Why is it not fully? There we go. Okay. Yeah, so do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe. We're demonetized, so if you like this content, consider becoming a patron or joining the, or making a contribution via the options in the chat and the video descriptions. So where were we? Did I change the page too soon? Huh. I don't know where the hell we were. Well, let's just go right here, I guess. For all adepts who would fathom the mysteries of nature and devote themselves seriously to the search after the great work. When the masters in alchemy say that a short time and little money are needed to accomplish the works of science, above all when they affirm that one vessel is alone needed, when they speak of the great and unique Athenor, which all can use, which is ready to each man's hand, which all possess without knowing it, they allude to philosophical and moral alchemy. As a fact, a strong and determined will can arrive in a short time at absolute independence. And we are all in possession of the chemical instrument, the great and sole Athenor, which answers for the separation of the subtle from the gross and the fixed from the volatile. This instrument, complete as the world and precise as mathematics, is represented by the sages under the emblem of the pentagram or five-pointed star, which is the absolute sign of human intelligence. I will follow the example of the wise by forbearing to name it, but it is too easy to guess it. So the moral, did he say moral and philosophical alchemy or moral and emotional? Yeah, philosophical and moral alchemy. I will give an example of what is meant by that is really kind of neither. But when we speak of Congress with a demon, right, we're gonna constrain the demon to our will. What we're really saying is that we are going to transmute the energy of greed into the positive anti-corollary. You know, it's related but opposite, in a sense, to healthy ambition and so forth, because energy cannot be destroyed. So whatever constitutes your being, you are stuck with it. But you can take the prima materia and transmute it into the philosopher's stone. And really, if you look around throughout the world, you see all of these geniuses and artistically creative people that are severely damaged. And the reality is that the process, as is dictated to us by nature, is that we must have this sort of negative material in order to transmute it into the positive. It's just the formula of existence. So we're, in a way, kind of thankful for evil, for having the opportunity of transmuting it. As a fact, a strong and determined will can arrive in a short time at absolute independence. So that's another thing I wanted to make sure I get to. We keep hearing about that, the independence and the full realization of the individual will and the definition of self and all of this. In case you've wondered why this stuff has been demonized like this, there's your answer. The tarot figure which corresponds to this chapter was misconstrued by Court de Gabelin and Eteia, who regarded it as a blunder of the German card maker. It represents a man with his hands bound behind him, having 2 bags of silver attached to the armpits, and being suspended by 1 foot from a gibbet formed by the trunks of 2 trees, each with a root of 6 lopped branches, and by a crosspiece. thus completing the figure of the Hebrew Tau. The legs of the victim are crossed, and his head and elbows form a triangle. The triangle surmounted by a cross signifies in alchemy the end and perfection of the great work, a signification which is identical with that of the letter Tau and last of the sacred alphabet. This hanged man is consequently the adept bound by his engagements and spiritualized. That is, having his feet turned towards heaven, it is also the antique Prometheus, expiating by everlasting torture the penalty of his glorious theft. Vulgarly, it is the traitor Judas and his punishment. Threatens betrayers of the great Arcanum. Finally, for Kabbalistic Jews, the hanged man who corresponds to their 12th doctrine, that of the promised Messiah, is a protestation against the Savior acknowledged by Christians. And they seem to say unto him still, how canst thou save others, since thou cannot save thyself? In the Sefer Toldos Yeshu, an ancient Christian rabbinical compilation, there occurs a singular parable. Yeshu, says the rabbinical author of the legend, was traveling with Simon Bar-Jonah and Judas Iscariot. Later and weary, they came to a lonely house, and being very hungry, could find nothing to eat except an exceedingly lean gosling. It was insufficient for 3 persons, and to divide it would be to sharpen without satisfying hunger. They agreed to draw lots, but as they were heavy with sleep, first of all let us slumber, said Yeshu, whilst the supper is preparing. When we wake, we will tell our dreams, and he who has had the most beautiful dream shall have the whole gosling to his own share. So it was arranged. They slept and they woke. As for me, said St. Peter, I dreamed that I was the vicar of God. And I, said Yeshu, that I was God himself. For me, said Judas hypocritically, I dreamed that being in somnambulism, I arose. Somnambulism is sleepwalking, in case you're not familiar with the term. I arose, went softly downstairs, took the gosling from the spit, and ate it. Thereupon, they also went down to the gosling, and it had completely vanished. Judas had a waking dream. This anecdote is given not in the text of the Sefer Toldos Yeshu itself, but in the rabbinical commentaries on that work. The legend is a protest of Jewish positivism against Christian mysticism. As a fact, while the faithful surrendered themselves to a magnificent dreams, the proscribed Israelite, Judas, of the Christian civilization worked, sold, intrigued, became rich, possessed himself of this life's realities, so that he became in a position to advance the means of existence to the very forms of worship which had so long outlawed him. The ancient adorers of the ark remained true to the cultists of the strong box. The exchange is now their temple, and hence they govern the Christian world. The laugh is indeed with Judas, who can congratulate himself upon not having slept like St. Peter. In archaic writings preceding the captivity, the Hebrew Tau was cruciform, which further conforms our interpretation of the 12th plate of the Kabbalistic tarot. The cross, which produces 4 triangles, is also the sacred sign of the duodenary, and on this account, it was called the key of heaven by the Egyptians. So, Atiela, confused by his protracted researches for the conciliation of the analogical necessities of this symbol with his own personal opinion, in which he was influenced by the erudite court de Gabain, placed in the hand of his upright hangman, by him interpreted as prudence, a hermetic caduceus, formed by 2 serpents and a Greek Tau. Seeing that he understood the necessity for the Tau or cross on the 12th leaf of the book, or of Thoth, he should have seen the multiple and magnificent meaning of the hermetic hangman, the Prometheus of science, the living man who make contact with earth by his thought alone, whose firm ground is heaven, the free and immolated adept, the revealer menaced with death, the conjuration of Judas against Christ, which seems to be an involuntary admission of the secret divinity of the crucified. Lastly, the sign of the work accomplished, the cycle terminated, the intermediary Tau, which resumes for the first time before the final denary, the signs of the sacred alphabet. He who speaks the truth has few friends. This is an old African proverb, and it struck me not only the truth of it upon hearing it for the first time. What is going on here? Please forgive my ignorance. Define author. Yeah, okay, so we're between chapters, so if you guys have any questions, comments, or you need clarification. The Lesser Key of Solomon and the Goetia. Solomon likely did not exist. King David more than likely did. And I don't know that it's really relevant exactly. Aleister Crowley actually said that the demons of the Goetia do not exist in the same way that, well, Robert Anton Wilson stole it and changed it a little bit too, in the same way the IRS exists. I can't remember how Crowley put it. But he also said that they are really just unmapped portions of the human mind. And so I really personally think of all of these processes as sort of circuit board engineering, you know, and the external world and the internal world are not entirely separate. In fact, the separation is somewhat of an illusion. I think that this is how synchronicities occur, right? The subconscious is connected more to the body and the physical world. And so when you bring the two aspects of your mind, the conscious and subconscious, into a greater degree of homeostasis, you're increasing symmetry. And so that symmetry is expressed in the external world through synchronicity. And Goetia is something similar, where you are given access to, you know, pop the hood and exert influence upon the wiring. One of the problems with the genie escaping the bottle, or the lab, or however that phrase goes, is that I think people have a little bit too much access and not enough wisdom. Luckily, that generally results in people just not being able to get anything out of it at all, rather than actually being able to cause problems. That was not the case in my world. I had access to all of this kind of energy before I had the wisdom to navigate it, really. But yeah, I mean, that's the best answer I can give, is that it's not something I work with due to an oath, and I don't really see the necessity of it. The only tool you need is your consciousness. You know, so also it depends on what your objectives are, right? The only operation that is lawful is the attainment of the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. Any other operation tends to become black magic. So unless all of your workings of any kind for any purpose are intended solely to elucidate unto yourself your true nature and to clarify your essence and being, and to formulate actionable knowledge of your true will, or to deploy those forces in the real world, it's all just black magic. That doesn't mean that the only ritual you can ever do is designed to connect you with your higher self. It means that once that is accomplished, anything else that you do is for that purpose. Otherwise, it is breaking your magical oath, at best, you know. So that's all I have to say about that. Let me check in with the chat one more time and see. Began reading the Book of Thoth. It's a great book. Let me check the other chat and see. I don't see any. What are your thoughts? Same questions? All right, so let's get into necromancy. And this is where it's getting a little weird for me, because this is not really where I go with this stuff. For me, it's only about the expansion of consciousness and increasing our capacity to like facilitate the action of our true will. That's all that we're trying to do. Develop greater understanding and the ability to set forces in motion that are consistent with that. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to go through the whole book. I said, but this is not the kind of thing that I have particular interest in, to be frank. So we have said that the images of person and things are preserved in the astral light. For those of you that may not have seen earlier segments of this, that statement is actually pretty incredible, because the astral light seems to be what we now call the electromagnetic field, or an electromagnetic field. And that would include particles, including the 0 point field. And there is some conflict about this. It's not unanimously agreed upon, but the general consensus is that information is not lost at the quantum level, to the extent that if you burn a book, all of the printed letters in it on some quantum level are still there. So every thought you have, every deed you do, every movement of anything in the universe is eternal in some sense. And then on the level of the thermodynamics, we have the balance, the antinomy of that, where information is lost. So preserved on the micro and lost on the macro. And this is how the evolution works. This is how the systole and diastole contraction and expansion of the universe, the phoenix process, that's how that works. It's a fundamental mechanistic constituent of everything in the universe. But I think it's really important to note, when it really seems like these ancient Hermetic thinkers had a clear understanding of things that they could not possibly have detected in the laboratory or with equations. Therein also can be evoked the forms of those who are in our world no longer. And by this means are accomplished these mysteries of necromancy, which are so contested and at the same time so real. The Kabbalists who have discovered concerning the world of spirits have simply described what they have seen in their evocations. Eliphas Levi Zahed, who writes this book, has evoked and he has seen. Let us state in the first place what the masters have written of their visions or their intuitions, and that which they term the light of glory. We read in the Hebrew book concerning the revolution of souls that there are 3 classes of souls: the daughters of Adam, the daughters of angels, and the daughters of sin. According to the same book, there are also 3 kinds of spirits: captive spirits, wandering spirits, and free spirits. Souls are sent forth in couples, and at the same time, certain souls of men are born widowed, and their spouses are held captive by Lilith or Nehema, the queens of the Sturges. They are souls condemned to expiate the temerity of a celibate's vow. Hence, when a man renounces the love of woman from his infancy, he makes the bride who was destined for him a slave to the demons of debauch. Souls grow and multiply in heaven as bodies do upon earth. Holy shit, man. You'll see why I had that response in a second. Immaculate souls are the daughter of the kisses of angels. The concept of a twin flame, I've never looked up. I don't know what New Agers think it is. It could be exactly what but I saw the term and I had a concept that I understood, it fit the label. So I don't know if this is what is meant when people talk about twin flames, but if you watch a cell divide and you think of as above, so below, that's a soul dividing, right? So the way we understand things is that in the beginning, there was a nothing. It was an absolute nothing. So nothing you can't even say is in reference to it, right? And somehow that nothing became aware of its own presence, and then it was something. But now that we have an awareness and we have nothingness, we have 2 things, and thus duality was introduced, and the none became 1 and 2, or no, the none became 2. That's how you say it, excuse me. The none became 2, and fairy, I can't remember. It's in the Book of Lies, I think. But the none became 2, because any, unities other than nothing is impossible. Hence the paradox that's intertwined and everything. But so this process of replication by means of reflection continued. And so every individual monad, every individual unit of consciousness also divided into two. So everyone has a twin flame out there, and I have mine in the other room. And ayahuasca actually showed me this process. Like I watched the nothing divide into two, and then the people, and there was like a geometric process that unfolded, and I'd love to try to recreate it with AI sometime if I get good enough and have the time, because it's very difficult to talk about. But that appears to be what he's referencing there. Gosh, what else? There was another aspect of this that I felt was really relevant. Oh, yeah. In the same vision, I was shown that there's sort of like a central sun. You could think of it as the sun, but it's like source, I guess. And then there's the zodiac around it in the physical world. But actually, every zodiacal sign represents an archetypal energy of consciousness, too. And so people kind of emanate at some point along this dial, of archetypal dial. And ayahuasca, like made this vision for me so I could understand it all. And then I went home and looked it up, and sure enough, Jung had matched his archetype dial to the zodiacal dial. So it's an interesting thing to look up and see if you correspond. And there's a almost 100% chance that you will. And you'll also notice that because it is a spectrum, you're not necessarily right in the center. You might be right on the line, and then you'll sort of be like a archetypal androgen, Wah, wah, wah. Where are we at? Nothing can enter heaven save that which comes from heaven. Hence, after death, the divine spirit which animated man returns alone to heaven and leaves two corpses, one upon earth and the other in the atmosphere. One terrestrial and elementary, the other aerial and sidereal, one already inert, the other still animated by the universal movement of the soul of the world, yet destined to die slowly, absorbed by the astral forces which produced it. The terrestrial body is visible. The other is unseen by the eyes of earthly and living bodies, nor can it be beheld except by the application of the astral light to the translucid, which conveys its impression to the nervous system and thus influences the organ of sight so as to make it perceive the forms which are preserved and the words which are written in the book of vital light. When a man has lived well, the astral body evaporates like a pure incense ascending towards the upper regions. But should he have lived in sin, his astral body, which holds him prisoner, still seeks the objects of its passions and wishes to return to life. What is the word for this? Metempsychosis. There's a certain type of metempsychosis that Plato called this. Oh, it's escaping me right now. But basically, there are, on the planets we forget, and in the suns we remember. This is the source of our consciousness, the sun. SOL, soul, add you, your specific individuality, and you get SOUL, soul. And so the idea is that you make it to Earth, but you do not liberate yourself sufficiently, and you either end up back in the sun or on Mars or, in Neptune or whatever. And you may say to yourself, well, these other places don't host life. And I once had a vision on ayahuasca. I had numerous strangers describe this being that would hover behind me when I played guitar sometimes, but they all described it the same way and none of them knew each other, right? So I see this thing and suddenly in front of me, and ayahuasca says, would you like to know what this is? And she explained to me that it was a being that is more like a gaseous spirit, that it's almost not corporeal, but it is kind of a living thing, and that they are from Sirius B, and explain the function and whatnot. So that idea that life as an electromagnetic phenomenon doesn't require air and water and oxygen, that there are a nearly infinite varieties of life forms, including those that exist in a gaseous form. And interestingly, I was told a bunch of astronomical data that was published 5 days after the ceremony for the first time that was correct. I know nothing about astrophysics. And it's as if the universal mind did that so that I would realize that I was being told the truth. I've told that story many times in videos. So if you're interested, you can. I think ayahuasca and the star tribes, I told that story in detail. It torments the dreams of young girls, bathes in the steam of spilt blood, and floats about the places where the pleasures of its life elapsed. It still watches over treasures which it possessed and buried. It expends itself in painful efforts to make fresh material organs and so live again. But the stars draw it up and absorb it. It feels like intelligence weaken. It feels its intelligence weaken. Its memory gradually vanishes. All of its being dissolves. Its former vices rise up against it, assume monstrous shapes, and pursue it. They attack and devour it. The unfortunate creature thus successively loses all the members which have ministered to his iniquities. Then he dies a second time, and forever the second death, because he loses his personality and his memory. Souls which are destined to live, but are not yet completely purified, remain captive for a longer or shorter period in the astral body, wherein they are burned by the odic light which seeks to absorb and dissolve them. It is in order to escape from this body that suffering souls sometimes enter the bodies of the living and therein dwell in the state which Kabbalists call embryonic. Now, it is these aerial bodies which are evoked by necromancy. We enter into connection with larvae, with dead or perishing substances, by this operation. The beings in question, for the most part, cannot speak except by the tinkling of our ears produced by the nervous shock to which I have referred, and commonly they can only reason by reflecting our thoughts and our reveries. To behold these strange forms, we must put ourselves in abnormal condition akin to sleep or death, trance. In other words, we must magnetize ourselves and enter into a kind of lucid and waking somnambulism. Then necromancy has real results, and then the evocations of magic can produce actual visions. So I have to make a note that when I saw a necromancy, I assumed he was going into some woo hard, and it's actually not that. So I feel a bit silly for underestimating Mr. Levi. We have said that the great magical agent, which is the astral light, there are preserved all impressions of things, all images formed either by rays or reflections. In the same light, our visions come to us, and it is this which intoxicates the insane and leads away their dormant judgment in pursuit of the most bizarre phantoms. To ensure vision without illusion in this light, a powerful will must be with us to isolate reflections and attract rays only. To dream awake is to see in the astral light, and the orgies of the Sabbath, described by so many sorcerers in their criminal trials, came to them solely in this manner. The preparations and the substances used to obtain this result were often horrible, as we shall see in this ritual. But the result itself was never doubtful. They beheld, they heard, they handled the most abominable, most fantastic, most impossible things. We shall return to this subject in our 15th chapter. At the present moment, we are concerned only with the evocation of the dead. Now, he said magnetize in order to communicate with these things. There are electronic voice something, I don't remember what, EVRs or whatever, I got one of those once, and there's pretty much no doubt that it was real. What was the other thing? I got to make sure I get to both. Okay, yeah. So, but first, let's talk about the other level of this magnetism he was talking about. You put yourself in a trance, and then you are magnetized to be able to perceive different bandwidth of the electromagnetic field, right? And so psychedelics have this capacity to allow us to, this is what shamanism is, basically. And if you think about it, when you're in full light and you take psychedelics, your pupils dilate. Why is that? because you're perceiving a wider spectrum of light. And just as visible light contains information, this normally non-visible light also contains information, but of a different type. And this is why we often have precognitions and revelations and insights, even, genius level innovations, discoveries in genetics and technology and other areas, physics, have come from interfacing with this normally non-visible spectrum of light. And so the story of my electromagnetic voice thing, whatever, I was in the middle of the Phoenix process, and I had been processing a tremendous amount, and I went home, and I had my girlfriend with me, and we were going in the door of my cabin, and one of us said something about, well, we have to find the key to the next puzzle piece or something along those lines. And I happened to be looking at my answering machine, and it was 0, and it just flicked to 1. And there was no ringing phone. The phone did not ring. The ringer was on. I walked over and checked. And I was like, what the hell? So I played it, this message, and it was a female voice saying, the key is in your chest. So, this idea that they are magnetic phenomena, that, that is their mechanism of communication. The fact that that is the way that entity or whatever the hell happened there communicated is consistent with that, right? So in the spring of the year 1854, I had undertaken a journey to London, and I might escape from internal disquietude and devote myself without interruption to science. I had letters of introduction of persons of eminence who were anxious for revelations from the supernatural world. I made the acquaintance of several and discovered in them, amidst much that was courteous, a depth of indifference or trifling. They was trifling. Ratchet-ass fools. They asked me forthwith to work wonders as if I were a charlatan. And I was somewhat discouraged, for to speak frankly, far from being inclined to initiate others into the mysteries of ceremonial magic, I had myself shrunk all along from the illusions and weariness. I know all about that one. Moreover, such ceremonies necessitated an equipment which would be expensive and hard to collect. I buried myself, therefore, in the study of the transcendent Kabbalah and concerned myself no further with these foolish English adepts. When returning one day to my hotel, I found a note awaiting me. This note contained half a card divided transversely, on which I immediately recognized the seal of Solomon, which someone had just inquired about in the chat. It was accompanied by a small sheet of paper on which these words were penciled. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in front of Westminster Abbey, the second half of this card will be given unto you, fool. I kept this curious assignation. At the appointed spot, I found a carriage drawn up, and as I held unaffectedly the morsel of card in my hand, a footman approached, making a sign as he did so, and then opened the door of the equipage. It contained a lady in black, wearing a thick veil. She motioned to me to take a seat beside her, showing me at the same time the other half of the card. The door closed, carriage drove off, and the lady, raising her veil, I saw that my appointment was with an elderly person, with gray eyebrows and black eyes of unusual brilliance and strangely fixed in expression. Sir, she began, with a strongly marked English accent, I am aware that the law of secrecy is rigorous amongst adepts. A friend of Sir Butler has seen you, knows that you have been asked for phenomena and that you have refused to gratify such curiosity. You are possibly without the materials. I would like to show you a complete magical cabinet, but I must exact beforehand the most inviolable silence. If you will not give me this pledge upon your honor, I shall give orders for you to be driven to your home. I made the required promise and faithfully kept it by divulging neither the name, position, nor abode of this lady, whom I soon recognized as an initiate, not exactly of the first order, but still of the most exalted grade. I have a feeling this is Blavatsky. We had a number of long conversations, in the course of which she invariably insisted upon the necessity of practical experience to complete initiation, which is absolutely essential. She showed me a collection of magical vestments and instruments, lent me some rare books, which I did need, and in short, she determined me to attempt at her house the experiment of complete evocation, for which I prepared during a period of 21 days, scrupulously observing the rules laid down in the 13th chapter of the ritual. The probation terminated on the 24th of July. It was proposed to evoke the phantom of the divine Apollonius and to question it upon two secrets, one which concerned myself and one which interested the lady. She had counted on taking part in the evocation with a trustworthy person, but this person proved nervous at the last moment, and as the triad or unity is indispensable for magical rites, I was left to my own resources. The cabinet prepared for the evocation was situated in a turret. It contained 4 concave mirrors and a species of altar having a white marble top encircled by a chain of magnetized iron. The sign of the pentagram, as given in the 5th chapter of this work, was carved and gilded on the white marble surface. As they are wont to be. Encircled by a chain of magnetized iron. The sign of the pentagram, as given in the 5th chapter of this work, was carved and gilded on the white marble surface. It was drawn also in various colors upon a new white lambskin stretched beneath the altar. In the middle of the marble table, there was a small copper chafing dish contained charcoal of alder and laurel wood. Another chafing dish was set before me on a tripod. I was clothed in a white garment very similar to the vestments of our Catholic priests, but longer and wider. And I wore upon my head a crown of vervain leaves intertwined with a golden chain. I held a new sword in one hand and in the other the ritual. I kindled 2 fires with the required and prepared substances. And I began reading the evocations of the ritual in a voice at first low, but rising by degrees. The smoke spread, the flame caused the objects upon which it fell to waver, and then it went out. The smoke still floating white and slow about the marble altar. I seemed to feel a kind of quaking of the earth. My ears tingled, my heart beat quickly. I heaped more twigs and perfumes on the chafing dishes. And as the flame again burst up, I beheld distinctly before the altar the figure of a man of more than normal size, which dissolved and vanished away. I recommenced the evocations and placed myself within a circle which I had drawn previously upon between the tripod and the altar. There upon the mirror, which was behind the altar, seemed to brighten in its depth. A wan form was outlined therein, which increased and seemed to approach by degrees. 3 times, and with closed eyes, I invoked Apollonius. When I again looked forth, there was a man in front of me, wrapped from head to foot in a species of shroud, which seemed more gray than white. He was lean, melancholy, and beardless, and did not altogether correspond to my preconceived notion of Apollonius. I experienced an abnormally cold sensation, and when I endeavored to question the phantom, I could not articulate a syllable. I therefore placed my hand upon the sign of the pentagram and pointed the sword at the figure, commanding it mentally to obey and not alarm me in virtue of the said sign. The form thereupon became vague and suddenly disappeared. I directed it to return and presently felt, as it were, a breath close by me. Something touched my hand, which was holding the sword, and the arm became immediately benumbed as far as the elbow. I divined that the sword displeased the spirit, and I therefore placed it downwards, close by me within the circle. The human figure reappeared immediately, but I experienced such an intense weakness in all my limbs, and a swooning sensation came so quickly over me that I made 2 steps to sit down, whereupon I fell into a profound lethargy, accompanied by dreams of which I had only a confused recollection when I came again to myself. The several subsequent days my arm remained benumbed and painful. The apparition did not speak to me, but it seemed that the questions I had designed to ask answered themselves in my mind. To that of the lady, an interior voice replied, "Death." It was concerning a man of whom she desired information. As for myself, I sought to know whether reconciliation and forgiveness were possible between 2 persons who occupied my thoughts, and the same inexorable echo within me also answered, "Dead." I am stating facts as they occurred, but I would impose faith on no one. The consequence of this experience on myself was something inexplicable. I was no longer the same man. Something of another world had passed into me. I was no longer either sad or cheerful, but I felt a singular attraction towards death, unaccompanied, however, by any suicidal tendency. I analyzed my experience carefully, and notwithstanding a lively nervous repugnance, I twice repeated the same experiment, allowing some days to elapse between each. There was not, however, sufficient difference between the phenomena to warrant me in protracting a narrative which is perhaps already too long. But the net result of these two additional evocations was for me the revelation of two Kabbalistic secrets which might change in a short space of time the foundations and laws of society at large, if they came to be known generally. This is what we're after. Am I to conclude from all this that I really invoked, saw, and touched the great Apollonius of Tyana? I am not so hallucinated as to affirm or so unserious as to believe it. The effect of the probations, the perfumes, the mirrors, the pantacles is an actual drunkenness of the imagination which must act powerfully upon a person otherwise nervous and impressionable. Pay attention to that last bit. These guys, Crowley, this guy, they hint at this stuff, and people just are determined to live in a comic book and a fantasy, and they just overlook what is being explicitly explained, and it's profoundly important to understand. Not unreal, but not objectively real either. That's a tough cookie for a lot of people. Let's see, where am I? I do not explain the physical laws by which I saw and touched. I affirm solely that I did see and that I did touch, that I was clearly and distinctly apart from dreaming, and this is sufficient to establish the real efficacy of magical ceremonies. For the rest, I regard the practice as destructive and dangerous. If it becomes habitual, neither moral nor physical health would be able to withstand it. In fact, Crowley compared people that channel to their bodies being a condom that is passed around by different people to be reused over and over again. The elderly lady whom I have mentioned and of whom I subsequently had reason to complain was a case in point, despite her asseverations to the contrary. I have no doubt that she was addicted to necromancy and Goetia. She at times lost all self-control, at others yielded to senseless fits of passion, for which it is difficult to discover a cause. I left London without bidding her adieu, and I shall faithfully adhere to my engagement before giving no clue to her identity, which might connect her names with practices pursued in all probability without the knowledge of her family, and I believe to be large and of very considerable position. Blavatsky was a princess. So he's giving you a very important hint here. There have been at least 50 studies of which I am aware on nearly every continent over as many years or more that all came to the conclusion that the only people that are affected by demons are those that believe in them. And so, people are all too eager to believe in parasitical entities as having an objective reality because it gets them off the hook. And then they go to some psychic who removes it for $1,500 and has done nothing but wiggle her fingers around and chant. And the person really just had borderline personality disorder or badly fractured psyche and had not integrated their shadow or whatever it is. And so they think they've gotten better and they're running around completely out of their minds now. This is extremely common. And when he's talking about her fits, these weird irrational fits and stuff, if you believe that you have been dabbling in these things, it is enough to give you these aberrations, right? So, and it's to the extent that there are entire nations that are atheists that have never had a single case of anything even remotely resembling demonic possession. Countries that believe in Jesus, the more religious they are, the more demonic possessions occur. And Italy is number one because the Catholics believe in all sorts of various entities and whatnot, and therefore they are assailed by them constantly. So you don't disbelieve in them to the extent that you're not able to extract information from them, that you're not able to interact with them, but you don't give them a reality of objective existence, even if they're real. Not doing that protects you from harm. So there are evocations of intelligence, evocations of love, and evocations of hate, but once more, there is no proof whatsoever that spirits really leave the higher spheres to communicate with us. The opposite, in fact, is more probable. We evoke the memories which they have left in the astral light, the shells of the dead, or common reservoir of universal magnetism. Common reservoir of universal magnetism. telling me they didn't know about the 0 point field. It was in this light that the Emperor Julian once saw the gods manifest, looking old, ill, decrepit, fresh proof of the influence exercised by current and accredited opinions on the reflections of the same magical agent, which makes our tables talk and our answers by taps on the walls. After the evocation I have described, I reread carefully the life of Apollonius, who is represented by historians as an ideal of antique beauty and elegance. And I observed that towards the end of his life, he was starved and tormented in prison. This circumstance, which may have remained in my memory without me being aware of it, possibly determined the unattractive form of my vision, which I regard solely as the voluntary dream of a waking man. I have seen two other persons, whom there is no occasion to name, both differing as regards costume and appearance from what I had expected. For the rest, I commend the greatest caution to those who propose devoting themselves to a similar experience. The result is intense exhaustion and frequently a shock sufficient to occasion illness. I must conclude this chapter without mentioning the curious opinions of, I must not conclude, of certain Kabbalists who distinguish between apparent and real death, holding that the two persons are seldom simultaneous. Apparent and real death, holding that the two are seldom simultaneous. And their idea, the majority of persons who are buried are still alive, while a number of others who are regarded as living are in reality dead. Second that one. Incurable madness, for example, would be with them an incomplete but real death, leaving the terrestrial body under the purely instinctive control of the sidereal body. When the human soul experiences a greater blow than it can bear, it would thus become separated from the body, leaving the animal soul or sidereal body in its place, and these human remains would be to some extent less alive, really, than a mere animal. Dead persons of this kind are said to be recognized by the complete extinction of the moral and affectionate sense. They are neither bad nor good, they are dead. Such beings, who are the poisonous fungi of the human race, absorb the life of living beings, narcissists, to their fullest possible extent, and this is why their proximity benumbs the soul and chills the heart. If such corpse-like creatures really existed, they would realize all that was recounted in former times about broccolocks and vampires. Now, are there not certain persons in whose presence one feels less intelligent, less good, sometimes even less honest? Are there not some whose vicinity extinguishes all faith and all enthusiasm, who draw you by their weakness, who govern you by your evil propensities and make you die slowly to morality, to a torment like that of Mezentius? These are dead people whom we mistake for living beings. These are vampires whom we regard as friends. Or even a parent. Transmutations on the next episode. I need to grab some water, and then I'll come back and we can have a little bit of AMA time if you guys want for a bit. And I am doing a music stream tomorrow, and these are getting increasingly important. So I have to put some energy into preparing tonight. But I will. Has it really only been an hour? Well, maybe we can go quite a bit longer than that. Let me see what's up in the chat. Do we have an audience? We do. There are actually other levels of reality I've experienced them firsthand, but there are also innumerable bullshitters in this world. Differentiating between them is a lot of work. It's not eventually. It's not. At a certain point, you just will glance at them and know instantly. The Krim person is saying that they doesn't think that we process other. That there's nothing in what you said that has any bearing on anything. The possibility that we're perceiving a wider spectrum of light is not something that we could experimentally verify. But this is one of the problems with the scientific paradigm, people come so dependent upon, exclusion of any information that requires reading between the lines or circumstantial or anecdotal evidence, no matter how much of it aggregates, that really results in stupidity. When you're not able to deduce from circumstances and inferences things that are really, really obvious because you don't have a photographic plate that has a record of it. You know what I mean? This is one of the biggest problems with humanity. And that's why I don't say it's an absolute certainty that that's what's happening. But, for example, the fact that these webs of color that we see are constituted exactly the same way for every single person. When they are recreated by graphic artists and stuff, they're the same for everyone. So that very strongly implies that when our pupils dilate, we are seeing, things that are luminous, which is something light does, that everyone perceives the same way, just like if we went to Egypt and we looked at a pyramid. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming enough that it is almost equivalent to fact. So I'm not sure that your logic really does anything but kind of sound like trolling. Why is the pentagram in the LBRE envisioned to be blue? There is a lot to that. One of the bits that I can offer is that the light of Lucifer is said to be blue. When we speak of the flat five, which is the tritone, the devil in music, it is the blue note. Oh gosh, there's a bunch more of these. Lucifer also is related to the Roman phosphor, right? Psilocybin is 4 phosphoryloxy dimethyltryptamine. Phosphor, it bruises blue on contact with air. There's the Prince of Air. What color is the sky in the day when the light is being borne by the, what do you call that? The ozone, These be great secrets. But yeah, the answer to that question is barely occulted in that answer. Okay, so this is our Q&A time. I'm going back to my little thingy here so I can make our environment a little bit prettier. So if you guys have any AMA stuff you'd like to throw at me, if you have any questions, or it doesn't really matter what the subject is either, we can talk about anything. I have a bit of time left for that, and let me just fix this so it's a little bit more cozy in here. By the way, we are still having events in the Sacred Valley and in the jungle over the summer, and so if you're interested in those, you can shoot me an email, and we can set up a interview to make sure that you fit. I'm also offering consultations, so if you're interested in learning about this stuff directly, you can also shoot me an email about that. I teach guitar lessons. By the way, we're demonetized, so we get no support from YouTube. So we do appreciate if you guys support us, because otherwise I spend an awful lot of hours, and YouTube is just like, fuck you, buddy. All right, I'm going to grab something, and I'll be right back. And, that comment earlier about the light and the retinal cells and whatnot, I seriously doubt anyone has chopped open anybody's eyeball and, used laser infrared, whatever that whatever, whatever it is you would use to monitor the behavior of retina cells when people are on site. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what you were saying anyways, but maybe if you object to the word light, you could say different bandwidth of radiation, if that makes you happier. But basically, visible information. Yeah. Anyways, all consciousness is sourced in light, and there is an increasing body of evidence to support that fact. The theory that gold or some superconductor in the brain was necessary for the brain to be able to process as much information as it does so rapidly. For example, but it was too hot and noisy for quantum effects, and also there's a critical temperature for superconductors to become superconductive, but light activates superconductors below or above their critical temperature. It's usually going to be when they're below. And we have observed light emanating from microtubules in the brain, and also entangled photon pairs emerging from neurons. And those entangled pairs are particularly interesting because due to this observation now, we have mainstream physicists like Sabine Hossenfelder or something, saying that she thinks that the universe might think, because the problem with panpsychism from a scientific point of view, or one of them, was that the distances are too vast where the information needs to be processed. But if we have entanglement, then it can happen instantaneously. And then all of these galaxies or nebulas or whatever it is that looks like neurons, when you zoom way out on the universe, there's all kinds of things that are very reminiscent of neurons, might actually be a macro version of that. So, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues with the scientific paradigm. I wasn't really trying to pick on that guy so much, it's just that it reminded me of that, That I'll give you guys a great example, right? Like right now we have evidence that, proof really, that non-neural intelligence, cognition, memory, even arithmetic, basic arithmetic, is done by certain plants on separate number lines. So they have two lines that they're adding on in order for certain functions to occur, and on and on. Slime molds engineering, out engineering humans, and all of these kind of things. So we have that as a fact, and a whole shit ton of other things. I'm not going to get into all of it, but actually Levin's bioelectric fields and how they can sort of override DNA, and you can affect the morphological expression of organisms without changing the DNA, and yet their progeny retain these mutations because of electromagnetic manipulation, right? And then the most compelling thing we really have along these lines is that an acacia tree has stopped developing tannins as a response to logging to get those tannins, and it made this adaptation in a matter of seasons and not over 10,000 years or whatever, in response, assuming that it's in response to this threat, because it's a fairly new thing, but this particular species was nearly logged to extinction. So that implies that there is something that is aware of, and it's not just that organism, by the way. If it was, it wouldn't be as big of a deal, but there are a bunch of organisms that have been observed making response-driven adaptations that epigenetics can't cover, right? So it implies that there is some sort of intelligence that has oversight in the evolutionary process that is aware of context. You know what I mean? And so if you take all of this stuff together, also an anesthesiologist discovering that ketamine and nitrous oxide turn off consciousness at the level of the electron, and that it reverses the spin. And so this gives more weight to the quantum theory of consciousness. If you put all that stuff together, it's pretty overwhelming evidence of a universal mind, and it tells us the nature of it. But of course, the mainstream scientist says, well, it's just a bunch of inferences. Like, dude, you're an idiot. You know what I mean? It's just like professing to be wise, you have become a fool. Like that's
how the scientific paradigm has boxed people in. And the problem is that most people don't possess sufficient intelligence to navigate this kind of stuff objectively and effectively, But you know what? You can learn to do that. And the sort of implication that without a lab coat and a PhD and, like solid proof that we just don't know anything at all, that is like making retards of the human race. It really is. This is why science is back for it. And if you disagree, look around the world and explain to me what the fuck is happening then. Your success is your proof. So, you feel me? Where do you get your colloidal gold? There is one brand in particular called, oh my God, Atlantis. And the reason that theirs is the best to use is that what you need from gold is for the angstrom size to be very, very small. And that way it's sort of absorbed better and it can be used more efficaciously, efficiently. So yeah, Atlantis gold. But I didn't want to say that because they've been ignoring me when I call them up for a link, I've been meaning to make a video about like what to feed your brain in order to really enhance cognition and mood and gratitude. I'll say it's music and more. Yo, yo, yo. I don't do peyote ceremonies, but I do San Pedro ceremonies. Okay, I don't see any more questions there. So what was I on about? I was going to do a video about brain health, basically, and maximizing your cognition and mood and all of the things that come with colloidal gold. But no one will give me an affiliate link, and I don't really want to sell their gold if they're not going to pay me for it. So I don't know if am I being a dick by not offering this service to maybe just to my patrons then, because then at least somebody is paying me. I mean, I feel like I should hold out for an affiliate link before I sell a bunch of their gold. So thank you for reminding me. I'll give them a call and see if that works better than email. Maybe that's all it is. Consciousness. Okay, so I'm not seeing a bunch of questions pour in, so I guess I'm going to get to practicing, guys. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Become a patron if you're not a patron, because I cannot do this for free all the time. We have to justify it somehow. So thank you so much, and share the videos. These are, really important. They're great work. Forget about me. The Eliphas Levi, get it out there, and they're not getting the views that I was hoping. So I would really appreciate if you'd share them. So would the rest of the world, because they need to know this shit. It's been hidden from them deliberately in order to make them weak and stupid, and it has worked way too well. So thank you so much, and good night.